Welcome to Leadership Rewired. Our mission is to disrupt traditional leadership development by fostering a community of resilient, growth-minded individuals who drive their own destinies and lead effectively through change without sacrificing their well-being. Two former colleagues and current friends, Allison Allen and Dean Martin, invite you to join them for an honest conversation that brings a personal perspective to the issues of leadership.
Leadership is absolutely not about agreeing with every decision that comes down. Sometimes there are going to be decisions that happen in your organization that you just have to get on with. And you have to support yourself and you have to support your team. Welcome to Leadership Rewired, where we tackle not just the soft skills and the day-to-day leadership issues, but we tackle the leaderships that create complexity for you and the people that you're leading. Today, more than ever, there are so many changes going on in organizations. And the one that we're specifically going to double down on today is when you have remote workers, when you yourself have been remote, and now all of a sudden you have been told to get back in the office. We know that Amazon is doing it. A lot of organizations are doing it. And you are the leader that your team will be looking at and being expected to hear from.
Yeah.
I'm Allison Allen.
I'm Dean Martin. Welcome to the Leadership Rewired podcast. Okay, Allison, here's the big thing. That's the challenge. If you're a leader and there's that mandate, everybody's coming back to work. How do we deal with that? I think a starting position is that as a leader, we know that change is constant. We hear that a lot, but first of all, just to appreciate that as a manager, if that's, if you're at Amazon or you're somewhere else and you're like, okay, a huge shift like this has happened. What did I expect? Things to stay the same? No. So that's the first piece, which is a bit of a tough message, like, shit happens, here we go. But I think where we really move to and where our heart sort of sits within the Leadership Rewired podcast is around what does it feel like for you as a leader to navigate this tension between having to be a leader and to essentially support or reinforce an organization's mandate or decision? In this example, it's everybody's back to work in the office full time.
5 days.
5 days. And then how do you manage, that tension between that mandate and then also what does it feel like for you? You've got your own experience of it, and then you also know the impact. You can already anticipate the large negative impact it's going to have on your people whose lives may have had to turn upside down in order to come back into the office. So that's one thing we talk about here on this podcast all the time. How do we drive that fine, ride that fine line between what an organization needs and what you need?
Yep.
And then we're going to look now at what are real practical ways in which you can do that. How can we not just stay in the, life's hard, get over it, or this sucks, so I'll just, look for a new job. Let's, drive your own destiny. Think about, changing your mindset. How can you employ some resilience here?
Yeah.
While looking at it quite realistically so that your well-being is not impacted negatively, so that your people are not negatively impacted either.
100%. I think the thing that we should honor here is that there's real conflict in this kind of decision that comes from an executive team. And the conflict is that, the C-suite, they don't fully know what's going on with every single person in the organization. They've just made an executive decision based on hopefully lots of data and information. Hopefully there is some support that exists with helping you cascade this information down and work with your team to get it done. But I think this podcast is really about your conflict and how you're feeling about it. You may be not necessarily supportive of it and in conflict, and that's okay, right? But to Dean's point, it's literally about how do you continue to lead with integrity? How do you continue to balance what's expected from an executive perspective and your team's morale? How do you navigate these two things coming together, which may feel in conflict with each other, especially since you're the person that's having to execute it? But how do you support yourself through this so that you retain your best people, continue to be productive, continue to increase engagement and all the things. As you listen to this podcast today, I want you to really think about, that kind of change coming down on you and ways in which you can help yourself, but also ways in which, you can own the fact that there are pieces that you agree with and disagree with, but yet you have to keep moving. So does that make sense, Dean?
Yeah, definitely. Good. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it. Yeah. So what's the psychological impact on teams and on leaders with a decision like this, Allison? What do you think?
Look, I think you should expect to have a hit to morale, right? I don't know all of the sort of ins and outs of Amazon, but let's just say hypothetically, and we're saying Amazon, but again, there are tons of organizations that are moving in this direction. You should absolutely expect to take a hit on morale. And you would hope that the organization did some surveys, that they did some focus groups, to get guidance from the teams underneath the C-suite to see how difficult is this decision going to be. You would hope that they actually did a lot of work, and they are going to, again, have plenty of resources to help you deal with morale and the resistance issue. But if they didn't, you should 100% expect this. You should also expect some kind of backlash. People will probably, if they're really unhappy with this decision, they will probably start looking for another job where they can work remote. There are a lot of organizations out there that are really leading with the fact that they're remote, and they're really attracting away a lot of really great talent. I think you would be remiss in thinking that people will come back to the 5 days and everyone's going to be super excited. You should expect backlash. I think you should also expect motivation and productivity to take a hit. When your morale is not where it should be, when you're resisting something that's a change that you didn't ask for, when you're starting to check out, that means motivation doesn't exist, and productivity will be absolutely an issue. Part of your managing the change, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but sometimes you have to just allow the frustration to play out, and you have to figure out how you can be there in a supportive fashion. And I think the other thing that I would say, in addition to the ones that I've named so far, is trust and credibility. Organizations don't realize how these decisions immediately go into someone's mind as this organization doesn't really care about me and my life. And my family and what's most important to me. So, a lot of people during this remote work time have changed their life. They used to live in the city. Now they no longer live in the city. Now they're in the suburbs, and their commute went from walking to the complex for work to now they are literally about, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours away, in traffic. And if they weren't one of the people that were asked, or even someone didn't even inquire about how this might impact them, immediately there's this sort of position of, I don't trust this organization. They can just decide to send my job to another country or to another place, and there's no loyalty to me. So why should I be loyal? So those are the spaces in which I say, this is probably where it's going to be a bit of a hit, but I think that that's an opportunity for you to step up and figure out very creative ways to lead.
Yeah. Allison, as you were talking about this almost inevitable hit to morale because of this lack of flexibility. It reminds me of our conversation, our previous podcast about managing change. And we were talking about how, as a leader at a certain level, some of you may be privy to some of these decisions. And so you may have already worked through some of the impact. Everybody is impacted by this. I'm sure there's some execs who are like, crap, I don't want to have to come into the office every day either. Or I used to be able to drop my son off at school or whatever it is. So everybody is impacted to some extent, but just to acknowledge that where you are in the pecking order or whatever your seniority is, you may or may not have had any notice about a decision like this, and to appreciate that's going to impact you.
Right.
And also that there may be people having a very strong negative reaction. That's their first reaction. And you maybe had that reaction a week ago or a month ago or 6 months ago when you were working with it. So I think that's also where an organization's that sort of climate of what it feels like right then feels so unstable because people at such different levels across the organization making sense of it because of how soon they heard that information or how long they've had to process it. And then secondly, still to acknowledge there are some people who are probably thrilled by a decision like this.
Yeah.
Maybe there's 20% of the workforce are like, great, I really do my best work when everybody's sitting and we're all together and I can just have my routine. So there's still, that huge diversity within a work environment is already unsettling enough. And that's our first kind of psychological impact. Yes, a hit to morale just because there's such fluctuation within the organization in responding to the change. Never mind the change itself.
Yeah.
This is just the fact that there was a change. People's heads are falling off because it's crazy and it's a lot for them to process.
Yeah. And I think your point around how close are you to the change decision and how long you've had time to grapple with it does not take away still the impact on you as a leader and how long you've known and all the things. You still have to, let's say you found out when everybody else did. I would be willing to bet, given the size of this organization, a lot of leaders found out the same time that their team found out.
Yeah.
And they probably had to get on calls. And again, I'm hoping, praying, especially given the size of this organization and the resources that it had, that there was an immediate sort of like cascade, but also an immediate sort of like use these as talking points or pulling managers together and saying, okay, ask us all your questions. But I'd be willing to bet that some leaders found out at the same time and hopefully they had the support to know what to do. And we're talking to those leaders. That's what we're talking to. We're talking to the ones who are having to carry this through and re-engage people in an organization that hopefully you still believe in. Like, I think one of the things that, we talked about this before, the trust in the organization, but, if you're sitting there wobbly going, oh my God, I don't know if I trust this organization, you then, have to think about like, how are you, engaging with your team? Because again, you've got to get them back into a spot where they start working.
Yeah. And
I think a big part of, go ahead. No, go ahead.
What did you say? I want to hear.
I was going to say a big part of this, I think, is just being honest. And, I hear this story and I'm like, but the big part of this is that this is hard. Change is hard already. And it's even more hard when you don't own the decision or wasn't in the knowing of the decision. But in these moments of vulnerability, and I know that's what it kind of feels like for some people, you as a leader have the greatest opportunity to show up for your team.
Yes.
Like this is the best time for you to demonstrate, that you empathize and that you understand and that you with them have to work through what's it going to take to get the team back to functioning.
Yeah.
And that you'll do everything in your power to advocate where it makes sense, and you will get answers when you can. And I think this is the biggest opportunity for that.
Yeah. And also with an opportunity that is still just an offer.
Yeah.
Allison,
more about that. Yeah.
Well, what you and I are chatting about here is we are not saying this is what you have to do to get your team on board. You don't have to at all. Let's just remind ourselves here, you have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
You have a choice. You could say, this is terrible, I'm leaving, or I'm going to be grumpy about this, or I'm going to bitch about it for as long as I get a new job. Like, pick your mood, choose what you want to do here. But as a leader, this is your opportunity for you to say, within these circumstances, I have not chosen them. Maybe it's a harsh awakening for me. To go, this organization sometimes makes decisions not in my best interest. That is sometimes a rude awakening for people that they didn't realize that. And they're like, oh. And as a leader, still Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up? Even in a set of circumstances you have not chosen or would not have chosen. You get to lead now.
Yeah.
You don't have to. You get to lead. You get to choose to say, in this moment now, I can hold multiple things that may be confusing. Maybe I want to look for a new job because this is untenable for me. Fine. Or maybe I'm going to stick it out. Or maybe I'm going to process my own feelings. And also, I have 4 direct reports. And also, I'm leading a function of 400 people. And also, I've got an intern who I'm supporting. Whatever my responsibility is, I'm taking this seriously and I want to lead. And I want to build trust and have empathy. Yeah.
100%. And I love what you just said. And I think the thing I would also say there is, even if I know that I'm going to check out, the kind of leader that I am, and hopefully the kind of leaders that we're trying to build in this community, are ones that would sort of say, I'm here now.
Yes.
I'm here now, and I need to help my team, my people, my group, my department, whatever makes sense, and however many that is, get them settled, get things going.
Yeah.
So I can still have, to your point there earlier, you have an option, you have choice. But, the kind of leaders that we want to invest in are the ones who give a shit right now.
Yeah.
And what do these people need right now?
Yeah.
Because you do have to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Should we talk a little bit about, go ahead. No,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I'd love to know how then, what are some practical ways that a leader can build empathy and start to, repair some of this trust within the team?
Well, one of the things that I love when something like this happens, and again, I've never been in this particular situation, but I have been in situations that are that can be perceived as being this grave. But I think one thing that I love is building forums. Start to pull together people so that, and I'll bring in somebody from HR or somebody from training or a senior leader that has some credibility. I'll build these forums where employees can come and just voice their concerns and frustrations.
Yeah.
And you're not going to do this forever, but you just create a space where people can actually come and express how they feel about it.
Yeah.
It's not something that they're sitting there ruminating at their desk about alone. They're in a room and they're discussing it. And you want to have that be something that's sort of facilitated, but also that feels very natural and not, like a Q&A or something, but more around something that allows people just to express themselves. And then that simple act of listening, giving people the choice to say how they feel, but you listening and almost, acting on, or you should be acting on anything that you can actually impact and anything that sort of, you can influence. Remember, we talked about things that are in your control, things that you can influence, and things that are just out of your control. What's out of your control is not telling people that they can't come back to work unless they have some special already arrangement. What's in your control is creating these forums where people can voice their concerns, taking away from that what you can actually influence and what you can control, and then things that you can't, being super honest about what you can't control. And just that activity alone gives people a chance to sort of say and feel like they're heard. And I would really encourage you to flex up that active listening muscle in that discussion. You are not the one doing all the talking. You are asking a question or opening up a forum, and people get a chance to talk.
With that listening, Allison, it is a muscle to really develop, because in this scenario, I would imagine there are a range of responses, but kind of like a binary response. This is terrible, or a couple of people who are having the time of their lives. And as a leader, for you to listen in a space where you are not taking either of those sides, whether you've got one of them or not, whether you secretly are like, oh, this is a good idea, or I hate this. In my role now as a leader, I'm here to listen and not secretly go, oh, yes, I agree with them, I agree, and weigh in. Or try and refute or come with a rebuttal about what somebody said. That is just to say, hey, what my own stuff I'm shelving for a minute. My listening is about, I want to make sure that I am connecting with you
Yes.
by acknowledging the emotion and the need underneath the words you are expressing.
Mm-hmm.
That does not mean I have to agree with you, but I can acknowledge and say, yes, it's really negatively impacted on this. I hear it's been really hard for you to do this. I hear financially it's going to hit you in this way. That doesn't mean I agree yes or no, but I'm saying I'm hearing you. Because unless people feel like they've been heard, they will keep on talking.
Yes.
Somehow. They'll take it underground. They'll do it on their Slack channels. They'll do it somewhere else, but they'll keep going.
Yeah.
So you may as well, a forum's not going to save everything, but I love this idea of let's start, begin these kinds of, ways of getting people together. I think it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I would offer is, even with a return to work mandate, there's still ways in which you can get creative about, at least I hope, I'm not, but, something you want to explore, but there must be still ways in which you can get creative about offering some form of flexibility, right, within the structure. So something you can consider is, okay, again, we talked about this group of people who are able to work fully remote because of some special circumstance, and usually that's associated with some medical accommodation or something like that. But, you could figure out, like, are there some ways in which you can offer, if the policy allows people to work hybrid, so remain hybrid, or even, instead of 3 days at home, they can work 2 days at home or 1 day at home, so explore that with your HR business partner and see if there's opportunities there. And if that's not an option, which, I would hope that's not the case, but let's say it's not, then how creative could you get with flex hours? Like sometimes your biggest challenge is going to be someone who used to be able to drop their kid off or be able to go to the early morning cupcake parties. I used to love that with my daughter, which is why I lived in New York City and I could walk to work and I had lots of flexibility. But, if you, how do you sort of flex people's hours so they can do the things that they love doing? If that's being, they're wanting to run a marathon and normally they would run, for 3 hours in the morning before starting work. And now they've had to basically give that up because they need to commute that entire time. How do you create some flexibility around off hours? And, through this forum, you'll learn, where that's an issue. And just simply, again, the activity of trying to do this for them, really trying to do this for them, will keep the motivation high. It may not retain them, but it will definitely keep the motivation really high for people. Anything else you would add on that one?
I think in terms of rebuilding motivation is to, you're going to have to get creative around what are all the different ways, the different methods you can employ in order to appeal to your folks. So I love your suggestion there around flexibility about whether it's the actual, your whole contract or some working hours. And then I think around also appealing to folk about their motivation is to come back to the work too. People are energized. People can and will be energized by having meaning and purpose. And so this isn't do I just deal with this issue of coming back to work, or do we do the work? We can do both at the same time. So while still listening and empathizing, still as a leader, step in now and remind people, whether it's your whole function or your small team or your 2 people you're managing, by having a sort of check-in again of what are we working on and what's the vision and why does it matter and why are you here and what's been successful for you and what's top of your list, like whatever your methods are around, whether it's your weekly check-ins or whether it's time for like a quarterly kind of a review where you really reviewing what they're working on, what they're excited about for the next year or whatever. Get stuck into the work again.
Yes.
Maybe we've just had a podcast on delegation. Think about, is there an opportunity for you to delegate a really high value piece of work that you enjoy doing, that you're going to support them on? Like, we're not trying to I'm not suggesting we are trying to distract people with bright, shiny objects like, oh, they're upset and now let's just talk about the work. No. And also they are here to work. So still talk about it. There is still, that's your responsibility as a leader to go, how do I keep you engaged in what we're working on?
Yeah. And I think it's, look, I personally think it's always important to remind people why we are working and what we're working on.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, there's no better time to start with why.
Nice. Yeah.
Why are we as a team, a department, as a function important? Why do we matter? And to get people to focus, to your point, on the work, I think is a strategic exercise that just makes sense. I mean, who knows? Maybe that will even help you by spending time doing that work.
Nice.
So I think it's just really important to recognize that, people don't leave jobs, they leave their managers, and they really leave the leadership when the leadership makes changes that don't necessarily support who they are. And so your job is to help leadership understand the potential issue. And it's also to help your team in the ways that we just described, whether it be the forum, whether it be creating some flexibility somewhere, or whether it be, really starting with why again.
Yeah.
To remind your team that you are there for them and that you're going to do whatever's necessary to help them reconnect with the organization. Should we talk about some practical strategies around team building?
Yeah, sure. Like, actually, now that you've got your bringing back the band, so you've got your team back together. And again, I appreciate maybe back in the office, that doesn't mean you're all co-located. You could still be in other offices around the country or the world.
Yeah.
But how can you make the most of the fact that maybe there is some co-location, or you've actually got a different kind of a team dynamic now that's a bit more in person? Are there some things that you would recommend leaders do, Allison, to leverage this opportunity?
Well, I think I think even if you had like the most high performing team ever and everybody was working well and you're going to take a hit here. So I think what you want to do is think about team building. And I don't mean, well, I mean, you might get into this, but I'm not talking trust falls. This isn't trust fall team.
Trust falls when you sort of like stand behind,
when you, right, and you fall back into someone's arms and you hope they catch you. That's not what I'm talking about. But I think you can, think about team building in the spirit of like social gatherings. You can think about, I remember Expedia, we were having a team building event, and this person organized, Southern breakfast themed breakfast. It was in Seattle, and I'm from the South, so it didn't necessarily line up. But anyway, it was good and it was great because people got a chance to eat really good food, and it was early in the morning, and people didn't have to buy food on the way in, and it was a chance for the team to start the day literally in conference room, and there was camaraderie. So think about social gatherings aimed at building sort of stronger bonds. And by the way, when you do something like this, you'll have that person that's on the video or that office that's far away. They should be and feel empowered to do something, similar in their office together. Right. But if you could figure out a way to do this virtually where everybody's eating something, that's just supercharging. I wouldn't, or having some tap into, again, talent development. Go to the talent development team. I want to create something that will allow me and the team to get together in all of our spaces and create social connection.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking for something like, a bunch of psychometric tools or something like that, but really around creating this social connection, the sense of sort of belonging together as a team. Yeah. And perhaps that can be something that's hanging off of the why discussion.
Yeah.
Another thing that,
sorry, I didn't want to speak over you. I think for a leader to also be quite explicit around their intention in doing this. So be clear for yourself around why am I doing it, and it's not going to fix everything, but it is serving a specific purpose. I may still have 50 people in my team who are deeply, deeply upset or disgruntled about this state of affairs. They can still be there, and I can still say, "This is my intention. I want to get people together for this purpose. So articulate it, say it, whether that's written in the comms in the email that's inviting people, or whether you've got 4 people in a meeting room together. Say, hey, the reason why I wanted to get us together was we haven't done this for a while. And I know it's within a loaded context, or it might be tricky for some of us. And also, I really love the fact that we're here. So that as a leader, you can start to sort of hold many different things at the same time. I think that's an indication of complexity of our human nature and of growth and of maturity, is that we're not just one thing. You can actually be with your team and say, yeah, I know this may be hard for some of us or all of us. And also, here's the benefit to it. We get to spend half an hour together on a Wednesday morning talking about X. And we haven't done that for 5 years.
Yeah.
Both of these things can be true.
100%. And I think there's something about saying it out loud to people and giving that reasoning, which I think it feels, when you were saying that, it's like you're acknowledging that something's going on with me. And you are doing something about trying to make it better.
Yeah.
Another idea to consider is leverage in-office in-person opportunities. So coming back into the office and sitting at your desk and dialing into a meeting is not what should happen.
Yeah.
Think about ways to sort of like make this in-office thing happen, right? So organize informal, brainstorming. So, hey, I've got like a problem. I need to get a bunch of you guys around the room. So join me in this conference room. Let's talk about this issue.
Yeah.
Make sure that check-ins have now officially gone to face-to-face. So move away from, again, dialing in Zoom. I literally remember being in an office once, and there was a few of us, and 2 people were literally sitting on opposite sides of the floor talking to each other, because that's just what they,
used to
doing. And it just happened to be one person was in the office. And so I remember saying, I don't know how I just passed one and then saw the other, but I was just like, when they both got the phone, like, why not just get in a conference room? You're both in the office. So look for those ways to have informal brainstorming sessions as a team, but also plan the check-ins to be face-to-face, like move away from online. And then where possible, facilitate peer-to-peer recognition things. So like shout out Fridays or, motivational Mondays or stand-ups are always great in the middle of the floor. A bunch of people get around, hear updates. So look for those moments to sort of facilitate, peers getting together and recognizing each other and, again, being face-to-face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only last one I would offer is building a culture of adaptability. This is, change. It's not going to stop, like I'm a person who is literally jazzed by change. Like my background is organizational development and change management. I've been doing it forever. I coach around change. It's one of the things I care about because I believe in the leader's role in change, but it's a lot, and organizations have to become adaptable, and they need help, and part of getting through something like this will build a muscle that you need to just make sure it's there, because you're going to have to deal with the change yourself, but at the same time help your team. And if everybody can just get their head around the fact that we need to be resilient, we need to be adaptable, change is not going to stop. Transitions are going to happen. And so one way you can think about doing this culture of adaptability is actually talking about the wins. Right. So on the other side of this huge change, everybody's back in the office. What are the wins? Well, the wins are, you're sitting at your directs leader's message and he's like, your team was the one team where everybody like got back to work. Like they were in the office 5 days a week. You may not see that as a big deal, but acknowledging that people actually did the work and they actually, followed the change despite how they felt about it is a celebration in some way, in some regard. So figure out ways to talk through the stories of resilience through this change, talk about, showcase any success that's associated with the transition and how your team leaned into it. Is a way to sort of keep momentum, but also to highlight that you're an adaptive, a team that has a lot of adaptability, and that culture of adaptability is something that organizations are going to have to build and to support. Anything you want to offer?
Well, I enjoy what you just said there, talking about those wins. And, I think that's good as a leader to do, to be able to sharing that with the higher ups. But in order to even gather that data and that kind of information, to be asking your team to be on the lookout for it is predisposing us to looking for success. So as a leader to actually say, hey, let's look for evidence of how these things have done, how we've responded well as a result of this change. Can you give me an example of how this has improved or how this worked well? So you're actually showing your team what to look for. What are the good things to look out for, that then you're gathering it. Then, of course, you're being able to show and showcase for yourself as a leader, this is what I've done for my peeps. This is what I've done for people and how we responded.
And I would even take that to my peer and my leaders meeting and say, okay, here's how my team has done against the change. And you will notice that your peers who aren't listening to this podcast and have never worked with me will basically be like, really? Really? How are you tracking that? How do you have that information? And to your point, some of this you could probably get through data collection, but other pieces of again, people in the team sort of acknowledging, here's what we did, and using your directs to collect that information and just shout it out. Make people aware that, for the team, but also for, your peers and your manager, your team got on board, and your manager, the senior most leaders, acknowledging in some monthly or town hall, hey, XYZ's team, did an amazing job within transition. And here are the things that we've noticed in their productivity. And this is the kind of change leadership we want to see. We'll just make your team's chest get so big and super excited about everything that they've accomplished.
Yeah, people want to do well, and they want to be led by a leader who's kind of getting behind stuff in a realistic way, not in a fake, isn't this wonderful, but like hey, this can be tough. And also I can lead and we can get it done, and we can still, go home at the end of the day and feel good about it.
100%. So just to recap, oh, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, your obsession, or what did you say? You're jazzed by change. I love that.
I love change. Yes.
Good.
You were saying.
I like, yes. Good. All I was going to say is good luck with that one. But I'm only joking. But, as somebody, as I coach other leaders around change as well, a question that I have used really successfully, and I've mentioned in this podcast before, is that whenever a leader is faced with something that is difficult, or any of us face something hard, is a reframing question of what will this change allow me to do differently? What will it allow me to actually even do better? Yes. We can't throw that question in too early, because otherwise you will want to get a smack in the face, because we haven't yet even just said, hey, this is hard, or this sucks, or I don't like it. And at some point as a leader, for you to be able to say, okay, I've got a team, I've got a function. This is the mandate. What will it allow me to do differently? I may not have chosen it, but here I am. I get to choose now how I'm going to respond, how I'm going to think about it, who I want to be as a leader. My subjective experience of this, I get to pick. And now I have all these opportunities of how to build trust, empathize with my people, rebuild that motivation, get creative around adaptability, use this as a very strong case around, this is how I show up for the organization, this is how I lead. Yeah. So it can actually be a real asset for you, again, not something you may have chosen, but you've used it to your advantage, and you've cared for the people in who you're responsible for. And that is what a leader is about. That's why it's a tough gig, and that's why it's such a joy and a responsibility to be a leader, because you get to choose every single one of these things every step along the way.
Right. Which is, yes, +1. There's nothing I can add to it except to say +1. So just to recap, just because I think it's this topic is so important, and it won't be the last time. I feel like we could almost spend almost once a month or every other day talking about how to deal with change. But I think it's the one skill that leaders, if they don't already have it, it's almost like my EQ example that I used a few podcasts about. But it's like you have to develop EQ, you have to develop change leadership skills. You just do. Because it's not going to stop. So change is inevitable, and your leadership response is what matters. How you respond to the change, what you demonstrate is what matters to people who report to you. Empathy doesn't mean agreement. It just means that you understand and that you're going to guide people through, right? You do not have to say with empathy that I agree with the change. That's not what you're saying. You're just saying, I understand how uncomfortable or, how you feel. And that is so helpful for people. Use team building, use social connections, use opportunities to shout out people, use opportunities to acknowledge people and recognize people as part of your change strategy. This will just demonstrate to people that you are seeing good in them, that you are interested in taking care of them, and that you care about this transition for them. As you navigate the shift here and as you think about driving change, I want you to keep yourself centered. I think Dean's question was really, really great. Some other ones that I would offer is, what can I control with my leadership, role, to help this transition be better for my team and better for myself? How can I communicate in a way that's effective so that people are able to hear and relate to what I'm saying? How do I challenge myself to actively listen in meetings and hear what's not being said, and then act on it so I can make sure I can connect? These are things that you just want to be thinking about from a call to action perspective as you sort of guide yourself through this change. We are going to be putting together a guide which will be on the Leadership Rewired website that you can download. That's directly associated with this particular podcast, and hopefully that can be something to help support you. Remember that leadership isn't about the circumstance or your ability to make the decision. Sometimes you just have to lead because you're in that position, because you're in that responsibility, and you have to push through whatever is coming at you. So Dean, let's end with, what's your big takeaway that you want people to have on the back of this conversation?
Ooh. I think my big takeaway is that you get to make a decision around how you show up as a leader. And I want to echo what you've just said here. We don't need to agree with people in order for them to feel heard. And you also, as a leader, do need to be showing that you are in support of what the organization has mandated or what that directive is. So let your actions and your words be like, yeah, I'm here. I'm a good corporate citizen. I'm going to reinforce what you've asked. And also I can hold that complexity of still being able to reach each of my individuals and know that they may have a different point of view on this. I can do both at the same time.
Yeah. And my big takeaway, or my hope for you to take away in this conversation is change, whether in your control or not in your control, is it's constant. And as every single time you go through change, your ability to adapt will get better and better and better. And your team, if you bring them along with you, if you guys go through the change together, will also start to adapt and get used to it. And I don't say used to it in a way where it doesn't matter, because it's always going to matter. Every single time there's a new change, there's disruption. And every time there's disruption, there are feelings and emotion and discomfort or celebration, depending on who's on your team. It's never going to not be that. Your job and your team's job and their ability to adapt to whatever that change is will get smaller. Because they will recognize that they can lean back on some things that they've already learned, muscles that they've already built, and they will get to innovation, which is what we want from everyone. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Leadership Rewired podcast. We want you to subscribe. We want you to leave a review. As we said before, feedback, please give us feedback. We are building a community of new thinking leaders who are not necessarily dependent on traditional ways of learning, but are using their own, everything that they have within their bodies and in their control to engage their team and do the work that they love doing. So thank you so much. And to join us for our next episode, where we will continue to disrupt traditional leadership development and with purpose and innovation. And we appreciate you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Allison. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.